So, welcome back to the Behind the Creator podcast, a place where we get to talk to your favorite creators and my favorite creators and discuss what goes on behind the scenes, what their vision is, and all of the details that they put into their content. Today, we have Frankie from Thoughts with Frankie.
Hi, Thoughts with Frankie. Frankie here.
So, we met through John, who was Mute the Wolf on Instagram.
That's the way I say it all the time.
Mute. That's a very New York way to say it. I gotta. Yeah. So you live in the city.
Yeah. I live
Yeah.
in Yonkers. Yeah.
Born and raised.
Oh yeah.
Wow. Born and
Yeah.
raised. I always find that people that are born and raised in New York are just very unique people. Because
Thank
you have like it's like a melting pot of personality.
True.
Because you're not inspired by one thing or another. You're just everybody's in New York, so you always can pull from all of those.
The good thing about New York, or at least like living in the city or the outer borough, is that literally like in 20 minutes I could be in the city. And even though like I laid my head, as they say,
Right.
in Yonkers, like I was always in the city in all parts of the borough. So I definitely see what you're saying. Like you kind of pick up these different attitudes,
Yeah.
different flavors.
Because you have, like, the Italians that live there, but then the Puerto Ricans
you know
are
what
there.
I'm talking about.
Hey, get out of my
I
way.
can get into character real quick. Just let me know. No, but it's definitely something special being from New York.
Right.
And,
Just put this a little bit closer to you there. Boom.
How's that?
Yeah, you can pull it towards you if you like. I just want to make sure we can hear you. There you go. So I think New York is a funny place because there's so many opportunities to kind of figure out who you want to be as a person, whereas somebody in, let's say, the rural South, they're kind of limited. Like now with the internet is different, but in general, you're kind of limited to like the influence that you can have on your life. New York, everything is like the world is your oyster, kind of.
Absolutely. And then if you decide tomorrow
Right.
to be something else, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's
There's like
almost
7
kind of
clubs
like
that'll take you.
expected. Yeah, it's almost like expected. Like, hey, you start in one venture and you kind of go off into another, and it's acceptable. If
Right.
anything, it's like, it's wanted.
Yeah, no, that's what I love about it, and I think it's a very free place.
For sure.
Definitely not monetarily, but in general. So, Thoughts with Frankie. I was watching some of your videos, and what kind of came to mind was like self-help stuff.
Yeah.
Like, there's people that it's funny because the whole self-help movement, like I've dabbled in it. I enjoy it. But back in the 2000s and the 90s, it was like kind of frowned upon.
Yeah,
there was
sure.
a stigma around it.
Absolutely.
Where like Tony Robbins was looked at as like this weird cult leader. Now he's like a pop icon.
Absolutely.
And so I think it's a cool little change where like learning to grow and learning to fix yourself is becoming a positive thing, which I think is good.
And I think it's awesome how people are becoming a little bit more open to it.
Right.
I think it's conversations that people should have.
Right.
I think a lot of cultures, especially in New York, there's, again, like you mentioned, the melting pot. A lot of cultures frown upon feelings, honestly. And I think that's another topic of discussion. I just feel like cultures don't allow you to open up truly to how you feel.
Okay.
And there is stigma. And I'm Hispanic. So in the Hispanic culture, I'm sure you could relate, where it's just like you kind of have to be a particular way. And if you feel indifferent about it, it's like, you're almost made fun of, or you can't really talk about it.
So like, give me an example.
Well, you can't, if there's something wrong, and I remember growing up, I'm like, you feel emotional about something, it's like, oh, get over it. It's, it's life. It's tough. It's
What
whatever.
nationality are you?
Well, my father's Puerto Rican.
Okay.
My mother's Dominican, born and raised, although her family, she's also a mix between British and German.
Cool.
But she was born and raised in DR, so she has very much, Dominican
So
background.
it was a DR household.
My Dominican family, I wasn't really raised around them as much.
Okay.
So whatever culture I have, it's from my mom. But mostly my Puerto Rican family.
So you're New Yorican.
New Yorican, yeah, from the Bronx.
Did
My
you go to
family's
the
from
parade?
Bronx. I went to the parade
Oh, no.
one time. One
Okay.
time in my life when I was younger, and never again.
Really?
Shamefully, it's not the best parade for people to go, for women to go check out.
Right,
Unfortunately, but yeah, I try to stay away from those things.
Yeah,
It's
I'm
crazy
not a
for me.
big fan of parades. I just can't. I don't get it. It's super hot. Everybody's congested. I don't know.
You're standing around, you're
Yeah.
pressed against barriers. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
for sure.
the only hydration is like a $10 bottle of water that's this big. No, thank you, not for me. Yeah, and Peruvians love their like I'm Peruvian. They
Okay.
love the Peruvian parade in
Yeah.
the city. Like it's big.
Yeah.
So not as big as the Puerto Rican one, but it's up
Yeah.
there. And I went I think twice, and I was just like I was traumatized. Never again, never again.
I feel like I definitely understand. It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
It's overwhelming. I'd rather go have a nice dinner if you really want to get
Yeah.
involved in the culture.
Yeah,
Just
right.
enjoy your surroundings.
Some
rather
nice
than
Peruvian food.
that
What?
stress. Yeah, no, for real. Can you imagine?
There you go. So let's get back to Thoughts with Frankie a little bit. Very self-help oriented.
Yes.
What inspired that? Like, were you doing a lot of reading, Eckhart Tolle and stuff like that, or was it?
Well, it's funny because all of my writing comes from experiences that I went through.
Interesting.
And
Because you do poetry on there as well.
Yeah, I do poetry. I try to express myself through those means.
Right.
And I feel like, and to answer your question, I don't really read too much of other people's writing.
Okay.
Because I don't want to get influenced by their vocabulary or their style, whatever the case is.
Right.
A lot of it is mostly just me wanting to express myself because I feel like I've been through things that others can relate to.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not afraid to talk about things that maybe I feel the whole self-help movement is surrounded by. You know,
Okay.
like I feel like it's almost becoming a trend,
Big time.
the self-help, ventures. But I feel like they talk too much about positivity. Like if you follow, the people that you
Interesting.
follow, it's
Right.
like, oh my God, I'm always happy. Life is fantastic. And it's like, okay, I get you. And I appreciate that. And I
Right.
appreciate your positive posts. But let's keep it real sometimes.
Right.
Sometimes you feel like crap. Sometimes you don't feel good. Sometimes, you do feel dark and you do feel
Right.
X, Y, and Z. And I want to explore that. And I want to let people know, like, hey, these are real feelings. These are real reactions. And it's okay to have those reactions. My message is all about how do you respond to those things. My message is, feel what you want to feel. Allow yourself to feel that and check your reaction and then respond rather than, shut yourself out or think that you always have to be super positive, super giddy, super like,
I totally agree. One of the things that drives me crazy about the self-help movement in general is that lack of ability to empathize with people that are not necessarily at the very beginning. I'll say that because when you're starting in that journey, it kind of feels like you're almost drowning a little bit metaphorically. Mm-hmm. And so when somebody is, let's say, super famous or super rich and they have their life together, it's almost hard for them to remember even or understand the struggles that somebody's going through when they're making, $10 an hour. Correct. And can barely pay their rent. And yet you're telling them, oh, be positive. Mm-hmm. Don't worry about money. Money is just a tool. It's like that doesn't make sense for me. That doesn't jive with me. So how do you address those things?
I address them by truly staying true to myself. And I know it sounds cliche, but I'm not... Even in my happiest moments, I always reflect back and say, what? It's all about gratitude.
Right.
I remember where I was, and now moving forward, this is where I'm at, and I recognize that because everything for me is a transition, is a journey. Nothing is stagnant. You know what I mean?
Right.
You're constantly evolving to something more, more progressive and things like that. So when I hear people's stories, for some reason. I consider myself an empath. People love to talk to me.
I was going to actually ask you that. Yeah.
People love to talk to me about their situations or open up to me. People, for some reason, feel comfortable. And I'm okay with that. I'm all right because that's what I want to do.
Right.
I want to hear you out because truly I feel like when I needed somebody, I didn't have that person.
Interesting.
Or when I tried, I didn't feel like that person or those people would empathize with me the way I feel like I could empathize with other people. So I always felt the majority of my life growing up almost alone, even though I wasn't physically alone.
Right.
I didn't feel like people understood where I was coming from. And anytime I did feel something, or I did feel sad, or I did feel like, life was kicking me in the butt, nobody could really say something that made me feel like, okay, you understand what I'm going through, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
So what's like the ultimate, I guess, destination for you, with not only with Thoughts with Frankie, but just in general, as somebody who is actively trying to grow? What do you see the future being like for yourself? Do you have a goal in mind or a vision?
So ideally, I would love to be able to just do this, have conversations with people, have people feel comfortable opening themselves up on a larger scale, not just to me, but publicly, because everyone has a different story. Everyone has a different journey. There's no way that I could give you my expressions or my thoughts on every different aspect of life, because I haven't been through all those things.
Right.
I'm not a single mother. I there's things that I can't resonate with. So I would love for people to feel comfortable and live their truth and say, hey, you know what, this is my story, let me share it, because there are other people out there that can relate to that,
right,
and that need to hear that.
I feel like a lot of that is changing and going into that direction now because of stuff like this, like the podcast culture that's coming out. People are willing to listen to 2-3 hour conversations about life in general, or psychology, or whatever genre. But I think that's helping with people's loneliness. I think it's helping with people's mental health, because they're understanding that they're not necessarily alone in this. Correct. And there are answers. So like, have you ever heard of Jordan Peterson? Do you listen to him at all?
No, I don't.
Okay. So one of his big things is just that self-help is not necessarily positivity, but it's owning responsibility.
Correct.
So it's being able to take control of your own life and say, like, if I can't, his big thing is clean your room, which sounds funny, but if I can't clean my own room, how am I going to change the dynamics of government or start a corporation? Like, it has to start somewhere. With you, right? Yeah, it has to start with you. And so it's almost a metaphor for, like, I need to change internally, man in the mirror kind of thing. Right. So what was your kind of take on that?
Ironically, I don't listen to him, but I agree.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's actually how I feel. This is not a pity party.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This is not that. This is not like, hey, look what I went through, or whatever the case is, feel bad for me. Absolutely not. This is truly, and I share this with my girlfriends all the time. This is truly like, hey, this is what I'm going through. This is what I went through.
Right.
If that's the case. And guess what? You know what? Let's proactively do something about it. Let's control our reactions. And let's make changes towards where we want to be. Wherever that want is, there's going to be light at the end of the tunnel.
Do you ever feel like some parts of the culture are shifting in a way where people are getting too offended by things, and it's almost like no taking, almost like leaving responsibility and throwing it away from themselves?
I do think that, and it's unfortunate. Like, people love to blame the younger millennial generation, or whatever letter we're up to in generations at this point. And it's funny because I used to feel that way. I used to be like, oh, these kids nowadays. You know what I mean? Like,
especially with the hip hop. I don't know what happened there.
But I feel like change is okay. And what happens is we naturally want to fear change. We're afraid of it, and we want to blame things. So do I feel that way? Yes and no. I do feel like the culture is changing. I do think it's going in a good direction. But I also do believe that it's easy to not take responsibility for things. And do I feel like people are getting a little bit too sensitive with certain things? Sure. But I do think that's also going to change. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's just a matter of getting acclimated to what's going on, and then we find something else to complain about.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's kind of two parts. So you have people that are all about responsibility and taking ownership and making sure, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and stuff. And then on the opposite side of the fence, there's people who are all about rights and I deserve this and I deserve that, where I think the truth is kind of somewhere in the middle, where you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps but still be empathizing enough to where you can understand why somebody might not feel that way. And I think that's a big thing to understand. Also, the fact that life only really gets purposeful when you start taking on bigger responsibilities. So I don't know how you feel about that.
That aren't only centered around you.
Right, right. Yeah. So the larger the responsibility as far as the world goes, the more purposeful your life can be. But if you don't prepare for it, you're not going to be able to handle that responsibility.
Which is ironic because when we talk about, influencing and changing and things like that, it's naturally, do I believe we're selfish beings? Yes. Right? Because everything we do, we have an agenda.
Right.
Right. But it's interesting because the people that we aspire to be, or when we are our most happiest, is when we're doing things for other people.
Right.
But that requires a level of vulnerability because nobody wants to feel like, I'm doing this for someone else, but maybe they're going to take it the wrong way, or maybe I'm not going to feel satisfied, or maybe I'm not going to get something out of it. But at the end of the day, like, I feel like if you're able to say, you know what, selflessly, I want to help, or I want to do this, X, Y, and Z, and expect nothing in return, that's where true happiness comes from.
Right.
But going back to, when we were talking about, people feeling sensitive, it's interesting moving forward because I truly feel like when you spoke about melting pot, not only do we have sections of different cultures in New York, but now we're cross mingling.
Yeah.
I truly can't think of one friend that quote unquote is 100% of whatever whatever ethnicity.
Hey, I'm 100% Peruvian. So
oh my God. But in New York, I feel like
I know what you mean. Yeah.
I mean, look at I think back to my nieces.
Right.
My nieces are Puerto Rican. They're Italian. They're Irish. You know what I mean? Like it's just my friends. It's just such a blend. So when we talk about people feeling sensitive, that's going to be an interesting topic because it's like, yeah, we could empathize, but hey, don't get too sensitive because look, we're all melting pots to begin with individually.
Right.
Yeah,
no, I think it's a great point. The idea that we have to be a certain way, like we have to be all about our responsibility, or we have to be sensitive. It can get kind of toxic because it doesn't allow you to truly express yourself.
Correct.
And then that can it can affect your relationships. Not necessarily always damage it, but it can definitely affect the way you interact with other people. Ultimately, your parents, your siblings, your significant other. All of that stuff is kind of based on the fact that you have an understanding of who you are. And so how do you feel? Like, I know you talk a lot about relationships. So what's kind of your take on relationships? What's your stance?
I don't really have a stance per se.
Your experience,
Oh, I've experienced so many different, because ideally you go through a relationship, right? And then when one doesn't work out, you want to move on to the next one.
Right.
The goal should be that next one isn't the same as the last one, right? So we're constantly, well, you should, I think, constantly have, improvements, hopefully, in your relationships. But also with that comes these different experiences. And when one doesn't work out, you move on to the next. But each one kind of leaves a mark on you and leaves some type of experience. And I do, a lot of my poetry that I write has to do with deeper, darker feelings. Like I like to, if you know me on a daily basis, people are like, oh my God, you're always smiling, you're always happy. And that's genuinely who I am. I'm always like upbeat, whatever the case is, even at like 5 o'clock in the morning. But
you're very extroverted.
And it's funny because I'm like the biggest introverted extrovert. Like it's so weird. It's so weird. Like I could definitely, be in a social setting and then say to myself, all right, I'm gonna step back and I'm gonna go into my little right. my little house, become a little hermit for a little bit. But what was I saying? Yeah, no. So with relationships, I feel like each one gives a different experience, and when I write about it, I like to vocalize positivity, but when I write my poetry, it's a little bit deeper. It's a little bit more emotional. It's a little bit more hurtful.
It's therapeutic almost.
Therapeutic, yeah. I like to express myself because I truly believe that whatever we vocalize is energy going out into the universe. Yeah. That it's gonna bounce back. You know what I mean? So I don't like to really vocalize all these negative feelings. I'd just rather write them down. Yeah.
It makes sense. That's in scripture. There's something about that where it says the power of life and death lies in the tongue. So every like philosophy has something like that. Karma, but I think it's so underrated how much people's mentality and what they say out loud affects their actual lives.
Right.
Like I know a lot of people that are just they're always finding the negative and saying it.
Correct.
They're not necessarily negative people or bad people, but where their energy is kind of lining up, it's like, I'm waiting for something bad to happen. And so, of course, you know, if you're looking for it, you're going to find it.
And that trickles back to also, you know, relationships.
Yes.
You know, and I feel with relationships, I feel, number one, you have to, and it's so much easier said than done.
Mm-hmm.
I truly believe that our entire journey is finding out who we are and our purpose in life, and on this world. All right. So when we, you know, when we go into relationships, I think often a lot of people have this underlying misconception almost, you know, that person is supposed to complete them.
Right.
And
Well, I mean, Hollywood, right?
Yeah, I mean, but yes and no. I mean, yeah.
I mean, Disney, you know.
Yeah, I feel you.
You complete me, you know,
But,
like,
you know, like I know we say these things. It's very romantic.
Right.
It's romantic, and I'm all about the romance. I am the corniest, like, romantic person.
Flowers on Valentine's Day,
I
all
like
that stuff.
Post-its around the house. That's just me. But,
Oh God. Okay.
Oh God! Did I just talk too much?
Yeah.
No. But all jokes aside, like I feel that people and from experience, I'm not perfect at all, and I'm not a professional relationship expert person, but just from experience, I do feel that we have to come to a point where we're like, all right, it's not that this person is completing us; they're complementing us. And that's the journey, finding a partner, finding somebody that complements who you are, your truth, right? Because in the beginning, the whole dating phase, you want to put your best foot forward. You want to definitely, like impress maybe. But I think it's important that women and men, from the jump, one, definitely communication. And when we talk about communication, I don't mean like, hey, this is where I'm going. Like, we don't need to check in like that. That's not what I mean. But communication, like if you feel something, you have to express yourself, because you can't assume that the other person's going to know what you're feeling. Yeah. And that often I feel happens with me. People think that I'm feeling a certain kind of way or whatever the case is. But if I don't express that, they won't truly know, and vice versa. Like I'm not going to know what you're feeling unless you tell me. I don't like to assume things, etc. So I think communication is important. Knowing that you bring something to the table is important. Knowing that you can't compare yourself or that other person to previous experiences or the past. Like I feel like if you're starting something fresh, I
think that's a mistake a lot of people are making nowadays. Just the way hookup culture is and everything. I think people are very quick to kind of judge a book by its cover because of prior experiences. Yeah. But one thing that you said I think is super pivotal is the idea of values or putting everything up front when you first meet. Yeah. I've noticed in like personal experience, but also like close friends of mine that get into very serious relationships. One thing that people overlook a lot is like the values that they have and what values do they actually have in common. Like this happened to somebody, I won't say who, but somebody very close to me.
They shall remain nameless.
Call him Voldemort. He got into a relationship with somebody, but they quickly kind of found out that they have totally different value systems. Okay. Like the core of who they are, what they believe in, what they want to do with their lives, kids or no kids, the most basic things weren't compatible. So of course that bubbled up to the surface. Yeah. So like for me, I think it's important for people to look at relationships as like, are values the same? And then that's like a prerequisite to even getting into a place where you're dating.
Because there was, talking about stigmas again, right? There was such a stigma around questions and things and topics that you don't ask, talk about when you start dating. You know what I mean? You're not going to ask him if he wants to get married on the first date. Like, listen, I'm old and I'm 30 now, by the way. And
me too.
Yeah. So I feel it's so strange, but the minute I hit, like, first of all, let's just sidebar. I stressed that I was turning 30, but it's weird because the minute I turned 30, I felt like this air of wisdom, like, got bestowed upon me. Like, suddenly I understood so many things I didn't understand before. But
so
going back to like the stigmas of dating, it's like, you know what? I know what I bring to the table. I know that, I'm established, that I'm a good person and that I'm a good person in a relationship. So it's like, what is there to fear? If this person doesn't jive with me, that's better for me.
Right.
Let me find out in the beginning, and let me not be afraid of finding out in the beginning.
Yeah.
I need this person. I'm all about organic interactions, organic connections. And if that person can't stand that I'm dorky, can't stand that I'm like whatever, like that I have a brain of a squirrel, that sometimes like my conversations are all over the place. If these little things, bother you in the jump, then hey, you know what? It was okay.
Right.
I enjoyed the time that I spent with you, but I'm going to move on.
Right.
And vice versa. And that's something that we have to, like, we, meaning whether you're female or whatever side of the coin you're on, you should be able to say, you know what? I respect that person.
Right.
I respect that person wanting to move on, and I have to let them go. Because at the end of the day, it's all about genuine connection.
Yeah, and I feel like there's wisdom to be had in breakups. Things that ultimately you would have never discovered about yourself otherwise, they come out because sometimes breakups can get messy. Yeah. So you take those experiences.
That's a whole nother podcast.
We'll do the breakup podcast coming up next.
Oh my God. And you know what's funny? Like, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Man, if I were to talk to you through every experience, like, I really don't want to do that, but
I want to do it. Let's do it.
Dish out other people. If they're gonna be nameless, but they're gonna know who they are. I mean, I could tell you so many experiences and stories that if people were to hear them, they're like, what?
So what's probably like the most, I guess, the breakup that gave you the most wisdom? Like, what was it like? Can you no names or any details?
Yeah.
But
No, well, I was with somebody for 5 years.
Okay.
And I think that, and I hate throwing age out there because everybody matures differently.
Right.
But for me, I got into that relationship when I was 24, turning 25.
Okay.
Yeah, 20. Yeah, around that. Yeah, more or less. So I feel that's a pivotal time frame for anyone as far as growing and recognizing and learning who you are.
And not to have a double standard, but I think 25 is a very pivotal moment for women in particular. Whereas like guys 30, it's like, where am I? What am I doing? I need to get my crap together. Yeah. Everything has to change right now. Yeah. 25, I think, is like that for a girl from what I've seen.
I feel like, I feel there's different periods of your life that change. I feel like for me anyways, from 21 to 25, that was that chapter, that experience.
Right.
And then I felt like from 25 to 30, that was another. But there's a level of maturity, a level of growing that goes on through those years, and they're important. And when I say growing, self-reflection. And unfortunately, looking, I don't know, I don't like to regret anything. You know what I mean? I feel like things happen for a reason. I feel like
things happen for you, not to you.
Right. And it's, again, everything goes back to your reaction. What are you going to take from this experience, and what are you going to do with it moving forward? So thinking back, though, I do feel like those were important years of self-reflection that perhaps maybe I shouldn't have dedicated myself as much as I did. At that time, I thought like, okay, this is it. This is the last, the last one, or like, this is the guy. And then you kind of, and from experience, and something that I'm learning, even to this day, is don't fall in love with the idea of something.
So good. Before I want to tackle that. Give me 2 seconds.
Fall in love with the idea of something. Fall in love for what it is, the reality. And that is something, oh boy, that in those 5 years, convoluted.
Yes.
I was stuck on what it could be rather than what it was. And it was not a healthy relationship. I learned very much from it. I learned very much about myself from it. I took an entire year off.
Really?
After that breakup, and did a lot of self-reflection.
I think that's fascinating, because a lot of times we look at people and like, oh, if only they did this and that, they'd be great. So let me just invest some time into them. But I feel like that's something that you learn when you're young. And, as you have more and more relationships, you realize, like, not only can I not change a person, like, if I don't like them and love them fully right now as is with no changes, this is not going to work.
And that's something that, that's something that, and we could tackle this from so many different angles. So the first angle that I want to say is, I believe, and that's something that, and you're 100% right. That's something that, and we could tackle this from so many different angles. So the first angle that I want to say is, I believe, you know, yes, you learn and grow through experiences, but also
Right.
your level of maturity naturally, organically changes. Obviously, I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago. And in the sense of physically and also emotionally and also just mentally, like, where my thought process was then. Now I look back and I look at these relationships and I say, wow, one, I'm happy because I grew as a person, emotionally, mentally, physically, and when we're talking about getting
Yeah, we
into
need community.
relationships
Yeah,
and not
we need
accepting a person
intimacy.
for
Yeah.
who they are is super important because we're first of all, let's also discuss the fact that we're human and we naturally want connections with people. That's just we need community. We want to be in a group. Absolutely. So,
Right,
with
right,
that,
right.
we
Yeah.
want it right now. And what
Yeah.
happens
I think that
is we
comes with like
start
discovering your
neglecting the
boundaries,
reality, the truth that
discovering what your
not
prerequisites
everybody
are.
you
Because
encounter
for
is
me, that was
potential.
kind of it was kind of
You
similar
know
in
what
that
I
in the
mean?
sense
Like,
that like
just because that person was nice
everybody
to
I
you at the
came
store
across was
doesn't
like,
mean
oh,
that they're
maybe
gonna
there's
be
a
your
special
next, like,
connection or something. But the minute that you start to say, I want this, and that, and I won't tolerate this, and that, it quickly weeds out like a lot of people.
I have it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that again, that comes with experience. And that relationship that I'm telling you about, I learned so much about myself from that relationship.
Really.
It was painful.
Of course.
Painful, like nobody. Oh yeah, and you know what? I have it. You know what I mean? And that again, that comes with experience. And that relationship that I'm telling you
Wow.
about, I learned so much about myself from that relationship. It was painful, painful, like nobody, and angry, and I was in a state where it's just like I actually had to get off of social media because yeah, I took 3 months off
Right.
of social media and I had to collect myself because I also have a Be Fit with Frankie page and it's all about my fitness journey, etc. So I felt that if I couldn't help myself, I couldn't
Right.
help you.
Yeah, because
So I
five
literally
years
posted
in,
on Instagram. I was like,
yeah,
"Hey, listen, I'm taking some time off because
yeah, let's
I
buckle
just
up.
wasn't in a clear
Yeah,
state. I was upset because I
and
felt like I
naturally
wasted
people
my
want
time.
progression.
So learning
Naturally, yeah,
that
you want change
nothing
and
is time
growth. Yeah,
wasted.
yeah,
It's an experience. Yeah,
right,
it's 5 years
right,
in. You're thinking like, all right, well, this is it. Where's the picket fence? Where's the house? Where's the kids and the dog? You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah, because nobody wants to be stagnant. Everybody wants more, 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 more because we're selfish. You know what I mean? There's a level of selfish there. But when it comes to recognizing like, hey, what is it that makes me genuinely happy? What are things that are like red flags from the jump I can't deal with? Write them down if you have to, or just make mental notes. And then when you meet
right,
somebody, let that person be them. Like one thing for me, when I started like dating again, I was like, I would never, never moving forward
right,
tell this person, don't do this, don't do
right.
that, or I like this, I like that, because then that person's going to take what I'm saying and alter who they are so they could fit that piece. Because they may not be at that level of clarity
And
that
that
I
was
am.
that was
And I
repulsive,
dated
wasn't
somebody
it?
post relationship where it's like, they were all about me.
Right. Well, I think that happens
And,
to a lot of
I'm cool with
guys,
it,
and I'll tell you
all
why.
about
First of
me.
all,
And they
Hollywood,
wanted to just
right?
make
You're
me
raised kind
happy.
of saying, be a
So I
gentleman,
felt
give a woman what she deserves, blah blah blah, be
because it wasn't,
romantic,
because then
and
their
what that gets
life
translated
wasn't them
to
anymore.
us as is um, become what they want and focus on them. Whereas like you're never told, listen, follow your own path,
Yeah.
find your purpose in life, achieve that purpose, and on the way, if somebody is able to distract you from that purpose, maybe give them a chance.
Become what they
And
want.
I think that gets misconstrued all the time for younger guys because you're so focused on, first of all, the idea of women in general, and then on top of that, the idea of like the one, which I don't know how you think of the one, but I think of I don't necessarily believe that there's one person that we're supposed to be with. I think it's more like the type of person that you want to be with. Make yourself into their counterpart if that's who
Right.
you ideally want. If you want X person, you need to be X kind of person in order to even attract that kind of person. Because if not, what do you have to offer them? So I think that gets lost a lot for guys because we're never told, fix yourself if you want a better person. You were always told, oh, just be who you are, be yourself. And I think that's like a big disconnect between culture and then the reality of what it's like to be a guy in today's world. So,
I think with guys, like,
Disagree with me, please.
I feel like we should be who we are. We should definitely, and I again, think, that's a journey. man, I think with guys like I agree and I little disagree with you.
Oh, of course.
I feel like we should be who we are. We should definitely, and again, that's a journey. You have to, we're constantly evolving, so we're constantly changing. But there should be a level of a foundation. So we are who we are. We want, we know what we like. We know what we don't like. When we meet somebody, and it's hard to do, it's easier said than done, there should be no expectations. Can we fall into
Right.
expecting something? Sure. But we always have to kind of like mentally pull ourselves back and say, you know what, whoa, wait a minute. Why do I feel this way? Why do I feel angry? Why do I feel emotional? What's going on? Oh, is it because I expect them to be or do X, Y, and Z and they didn't do it? Is that fair for me to think that or feel that way? Okay. Is this a flag or not a flag? So I feel that connections should be genuine. It should be organic. And I keep using that word, but I think organic connections in any relationship is important. Friendship,
Right. Show up
family,
at her door with a
especially when we're
boombox.
talking
So,
about
yeah.
intimate relationships like that. And I think that
Well, you're all
men
about
in
it
general, yeah.
if you like the
Does
guy.
Hollywood kind of
So-
romanticize the whole thing, like be on top of the girl like all the time? Yeah, and don't get me wrong.
Listen,
I'm all
John
about
Cusack.
that.
John Cusack. You know who
I'm
John
all
Cusack,
about
guys.
it.
He was not
Well,
invited
yeah,
to
obviously,
that girl's house.
Obviously, if you're not
but
invited,
the movie ended well for him.
If I'm calling you bro or
But it's
broski,
because-
please
it's 'cause
don't.
he's a
Please
handsome
don't come
dude,
to my
that's why.
door with a boombox and.
I like the romantic stuff.
Uh-huh.
And I think that there's like a fine line. People think like, oh, I'm being too vulnerable, or I'm suffocating them.
He convinced her.
I like that too. Like I sometimes.
Yeah, no, but I think that like I like the romantic stuff,
And then I'm like,
and I think that there's like a fine line. People think like, oh, I'm being
Yeah.
too vulnerable,
Yeah.
or I'm suffocating them, and I was like that too. Like and sometimes like even now I always question like, am I suffocating the person? Am I doing too much?
Right.
And then I'm like, you know what? I can't worry about that. I need to live my truth. If
I agree
feel
with
like
that.
doing X, Y,
I
and Z,
totally
I'm
agree
gonna
with that.
do
I
it.
think
How
that
you
it's kind of
choose
up to
to
both
accept
people
it
to set
is
their
on you.
boundaries, and
it's
if their
too
boundaries
much for
are
you,
similar,
then it's
that's
your decision,
organic,
your
right?
choice. So
But
you're
if
free to tell me, hey, listen, I
if a
need to
guy
do
doesn't
this.
set his boundaries, it's very
Pump
easy
the
for him to
brakes.
kind of fall into the whole throwing themselves at a girl thing, and then on the opposite side of that, yeah, of course.
because we're naturally, and I hate to say that guys aren't emotional. Guys are emotional. The difference is that girls are kind of like brought up
Yeah.
to.
And I think it goes for girls too. I think it goes
Right.
heavy for girls because we're naturally. And I hate to say that guys
man.
aren't emotional. Guys are emotional. The difference is that girls are kind of like brought up
Right.
to naturally express themselves more emotionally than guys. They're almost told culturally like AAA. Society is like AAA. Toughen up, guy. If you don't got a beard, you're not. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a jokester. Sorry. No, but I think that when it comes to it being, emotions, I think it's okay to express yourself, but again, with the chemistry, know who you are, know what you want, and then allow that person to show themselves to you.
Right.
And say, okay, I like what they're doing, I don't like what they're doing. And just keep mental notes. Don't try to change the person. If that person likes to wear or do
It's a marquee.
or say and what Marquis says, that's cool. It's a matter of what you're able and willing to accept. If this particular person likes to, I don't know, go out every Friday to the bar and drink with their whatever, like if that's what they like to do, let them do it. Now, is it something that you are willing to accept and feel comfortable with? Then that's on you. And that's what I mean about communication. So allowing each person to be their own person, and then seeing if you
Right.
guys jive and being okay with putting a stop to that and saying, you know what, it was a great time that we had together. It was a great experience. I appreciate you. You're a great human being, but maybe we're not meant for each other. And that's okay, because I also do believe that the universe, they bring people into your life, right? Now, that doesn't mean like that is the person for you. Like, no, you're learning something from that person. You're grabbing something, and there's an
Or
exchange, because
experience it in
sometimes
general.
maybe you're
Yeah.
there for that person. Maybe the type of person that you are, the personality that you have, the things that you believe in, the values that you have, the universe is like, this person needs to learn more about this and experience it, and that's why you're in their life. And vice versa. Maybe that person is meant to leave something for you, and then you move on to the next experience. So it's similar to what, and this is why I say, like, I agree and disagree. Like, I do believe a little bit what you're saying, in the sense of that people are meant to come in and out of your life. There's an exchange there of interactions where you're supposed to give and take, and you're learning and you're evolving and you're growing. But do I also believe that there is a soulmate out there for you, that there is a person that you are meant to stay with for the rest of your life? I do. Where do these philosophies come from? I would hope, and I would like to say that it's not Hollywood, but lately, and I don't know if it's because I'm paying attention more, but I've come across people that are in like really long relationships. I'm talking about 35 plus years, and it's fascinating to me. The longest relationship I was ever in was
Right.
the 5 years. Prior to that, I was very, and I said it in one of my videos. Um, Prior to that, I was very like, all right, what are you offering me? Me. And if it didn't fit my profile, peace. But it's not fair either. It's more of like, okay, what can I also offer the
Right.
person? Let that person show themselves to me and see if we jive organically, and not get caught up in the whole idea of what things could be. Like, oh, I envision myself with this person in a nice house and the picket fence and growing old together. I mean, are those
Yeah.
thoughts gonna come to us? Yeah, because
I think it's a really
that's what we
healthy
want.
thing to
Ultimately,
look at it at,
whatever
not as
you
like
envision
what
is
can
what
I
you
get out of
secretly
this
want
relationship,
inside,
but more
and you
so
wanna
like
see
what
if that
can we
person
build
fits that puzzle,
together.
And that's the whole reason why we're taking on that journey and putting in that effort and putting in that time.
Not what this person could complete or what I could complete for that person, but rather what can we cultivate together.
Right.
You're complete, I'm complete.
Absolutely, and
Right.
that's key, and you nailed it, because I feel like relationships, again, going back to not what this person could complete or what I could complete for that person, but rather what can we cultivate together. You're complete, I'm complete.
Oh
We're
yeah.
complementing each other, and we're creating something new, whether it's an experience or whatever the case is. And I think that's important. And lately, I've been bumping into people with long-term relationships, and I
Yeah,
think,
it's
first of all,
crazy.
I think the elderly, like, are fascinating, because
This is
especially
right
the
after the
older they
Great
get, I'm like,
Depression.
wow. Like, my grandmother,
Wow.
before she passed, I used to love sitting in the kitchen with her and talking about, like, 1930. Like, she was born in 1925.
Could you imagine seeing all
So
that?
imagine,
I mean,
she was.
we're kind of
She
there with
knows
like,
about
hey,
horse and
kids.
buggies.
Once there was no
She
internet.
knows about the first television, the first microwave, the first color
Yeah.
Like, there's so many firsts.
It's like I have,
You know what I mean?
I have little cousins that are
It's insane.
15 and
Not only
12,
seeing it, but
and
living
I've told them, like, listen, at one point you couldn't use the phone and go on the internet at the same
I
time,
remember having
and they
to
were
wait.
baffled. They're like, what does that mean? What do you? There wasn't Wi-Fi. Like, what
The
is?
dial-ups.
They have no comprehension of it at all.
And it's funny, not only with technology, but just the other day I was talking to, I just
Yeah.
started training in martial arts. One of the students there, he
Yeah.
was young. And I was trying to memorize a combination.
And it's funny, not only with technology, but just the other day I was talking to so I do training in
Yeah,
and one of
with the
students
colors,
there,
yeah.
he's young, and I was trying to memorize a combination. We were hitting pads, and I was like, oh man, this reminds me of the game Simon.
Right.
Do you remember Simon with the colors and the memory? And then just
Yeah,
like
for
it
real.
just gets worse and worse, and you're just trying
Wow.
to remember. And he's looking at me with
That's
a blank
that's way
stare.
before Xbox
like,
and even Nintendo.
I'm
I
like,
think.
the game
Yeah, that's
Simon, no?
crazy.
The memory game? He's like, no. I'm like, oh God, I just dated myself.
Yeah.
I was like,
it's like that
oops,
quote. I forget who said
but-
it, but we stand on the shoulders of giants. Like everything that we accomplish in modern culture
So
is
we're
like
gonna
because
tell our
people have
kids one day,
accomplished
like,
so
hey,
much
remember,
more before
all this stuff
Tesla
that you
and
guys are
all these
born
great
with,
people, even
everything
like
just
Elon
comes
Musk.
naturally
We're
to
we're
them.
standing on their shoulders, looking into the future, trying to find out what's next. Maybe the evolution of like who we are emotionally and technology and everything. Like without like the biblical studies and without Plato and Socrates and stuff like that, we have no idea what we're doing, but we reference those things and say, okay, if this is true, then what's next?
And it's funny because people complain about like technology disconnecting people while
Yeah.
strange, right? It's intended for connection.
Right.
Honestly, it's funny because I always think
This
back
could
to
also, yeah. And it's funny because people complain about like technology disconnecting people while
Yeah.
connecting at the same time. It's strange, right? It's intended for connection, but honestly, it's funny because I always think back to you know
talk to
Steve
a
Jobs, and
bajillion
I'm just
people at the
like,
same time.
Yeah.
he's such an introvert,
Same time.
but he created something that
Our
it's
own
like
little intimate
for the
circle.
It's true.
extrovert before the
Yeah,
introvert. I don't know, like it's funny. Like I always think about like our phones.
Yeah,
Like
no, I mean, there's a
we could
lot of that
talk
talk
to
of
a
like
bajillion
technology
people
is
at the
going to be the
same
downfall for
time,
us, but
but not at the same
like Gary V,
time.
do you
Like
know
we're,
what Gary
the
V is?
comfort of our
Okay,
own
all
little
right.
intimate circle.
Just saying.
But yeah, I'm not
Oh,
mad at
God.
technology at all. It's just you have to adapt to it.
Zodiac.
You have to.
Yes.
Oh
Do I
God.
always ask people what their sign is? Also, yes.
I gotta tell you, I'm a Leo, but every
Of
time
course,
somebody
first of all,
tells me
he's
what a
a
Leo is,
Scorpio
I
like
don't
me.
relate to it. I have no idea.
Am I into zodiacs? Yes.
Then
Do
they
I
say
always ask
that.
people what their sign is? Also, yes.
That's what makes different Leos different.
That's such a Scorpio thing to say.
Oh my God, that's a whole nother discussion because it's not just about
No,
you
so
being your zodiac sign.
reason I
but
bring
you
up-
have your moon.
reason I bring up
you have
Gary
to know your
is,
moon and you have to know the person's
he says he talks about
rising, and
technology a lot,
that's what
like,
makes
and what he says
different
is like
Leos
technology is not
different.
changing
Different
us, it's
Scorpios.
exposing who we
But
naturally are. I think that's such a big difference. Like
Miss Cleo.
we can sit
Call
there and
me
like
now.
poke our finger at like Twitter or Facebook, whatever, for like making us volatile, but we already are. We just have somewhere to voice it now. It's just a difference. Whereas people would go to the market or whatever.
Like it's tough because people. And it's so funny. I was just having this discussion with somebody last night. People want to go online.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Different person. Like listen.
The only thing is with that, like it's tough because people. So it and it's
Oh,
so
yeah.
funny. I was just
That's
having
good to
this
know.
discussion with
I think I'm
somebody
different online. Yeah,
People
and I'll
wanna
tell
go
you why. Because like
online?
my whole thing is like Instagram and stuff
I'm
like
a
that. That's
different
my
person. Like,
job.
listen,
It's not
the
who I
way I
am.
am online,
So I'm
if you see
trying
me
to
in
capitalize
person,
on that. But at the same time,
me.
if everybody's gonna be fake, then I'm gonna like,
like-
fake it to the next level. Like I'm taking a plane in outer space and stuff. You know, like I'd rather just do cool stuff like that because then you're just
Yeah.
playing on the fact that everything is fake. Like there's a picture I have up now where it's me sitting overlooking Japan. I was in Ohio.
Didn't make it.
Yeah.
You know what's so funny? Like, I don't know. I can't do that. Like, literally, like, it's funny how you're, like, saying, like, oh, it's a platform for you to be a different person.
Yeah. Well, to express a different thing, not necessarily be a different person.
You know what's so funny? Like, I don't know. I can't do that. Like, literally, like, it's funny how you're, like, saying, like, oh, it's a platform for you to be a different person. For me,
Right.
a different thing. True. You do seem genuine. Yes. You
That's
do
a
seem
that's
like
a
who you
conversation
are
I've been
online,
having with a lot of
for
people
me,
in
I
like
see it as a
the digital
platform
space
to
and the
show
digital
people
industry.
more of who I am, right?
Where's
So
the
it's like an
line between
extension.
authenticity
So
and like just a
I
blatant
try to
disregard
be
for
so truthful
privacy?
on that
You know,
because
because
I feel like
a
it's
lot
so
of times with people who have like big
with-
platforms that I know, what ends up happening is like their privacy just goes away more and more. So it's like, how much do you really put out there to the point where you can be critiqued and criticized?
Because it goes back to you saying, oh, so you're an extrovert? Oh, I am actually both. I'm probably, depending on people who really know me, I'm probably more of an introvert than anything. I feel
So it's funny because and it goes back to you saying like, oh, so you're an extrovert? Oh, I am actually both. I'm probably, depending on people who
Right.
really know me, I'm probably more of an introvert than anything. I feel comfortable being alone, and I'm okay with that. People on social media, they feel like they know me. And do they know me? Yes, they know a part of me. Because I'm also,
Right.
believe
You
it or
have-
not,
you
a
have
very
your
private
boundaries,
person.
yeah.
As much as I do talks with Frankie and I'm exposing my poetry, I'm exposing my feelings, I'm exposing, whatever my thoughts on the videos, there's still very much about me that people don't know. So I have boundaries of what I allow people to know about me. Because at the end of the day, it's like, I don't want to just say, hey, like, cause it's funny because, I was also having this discussion, like social media, it's
Right.
all about me. Like, yes and no. Like, yeah, do we have platforms? Do we want to create these things because we want to be exposed and we want to put ourselves out there? Sure. But I also want to keep it authentic to what my message is. Like, it's not about me. Again, I'm expressing to these people
Interesting.
what I went
Yeah.
through because I want to help them. So if I feel like whatever it is that I'm sharing is borderline me venting versus me helping, then I won't share it. You
Right.
know what I mean? So I'm always conscious of like, okay, where are my feelings right now? What are my intentions? Am I just like spewing out whatever just because I want attention, or am I putting it out there because what I have to say has a message that's going to help you ultimately? And then that's how I kind of like gauge my content for the most part. And same thing with my fitness page. It's like, all right, am I putting this picture? Am I putting this post? So it's more of like me, look at me, look what I'm doing. No, I want to make sure that it's giving a message like, okay, this is what I'm doing, this is my experience, but you could do it too, or is it going to help you? And that's how I kind of like gauge the content and whether or not like, I'm saying to myself, how much does this person need to
Yeah,
really know
no.
about me? And
No.
I'm not
Yeah, or
being
his
fake.
kids,
It's just
yeah.
more of like, what am I keeping private? Like, look at Gary Vee. You would think that he's
Right.
just like putting himself out there all the time. He's always on social media. He never, you
Right.
try to Google his wife, you won't find any information on his wife.
Right.
Nothing. Or his
Yeah.
kids. That part of his life is so private. And I respect it, but does that make him fake? Does that make him somebody that's not relatable?
Right,
Absolutely not.
right.
Can we sit here and assume that,
Right,
oh, he's
and
never
that's why I
home.
think like his take
He
is
doesn't love
is
his
right. Like
wife.
if you're
He doesn't love
naturally
his
a
kids.
person that likes to
He doesn't
show
play catch
like
with
who
them.
you
Like,
are to
just
the
because
world,
it's not
you're going to
posted doesn't
utilize
mean that it
social
didn't
for that.
happen.
But if
You
you're
know
the
what I mean?
type of person that
That's
likes
just
to
what he chooses
embellish
to
or like
share and not share. So
express
that's
yourself
kind of
in
like
different
where I'm
ways,
at.
and that's what you'll use social for. Like it's very unique the way people use it, and that's why I think like there's this cool movie that I saw that kind of speaks to that a little bit. I forget who the actor was, but Usher was in it as like a cameo. And the story is like this guy's a really good graphic designer. This is like 2011, 12 when graphic design was like the thing and Facebook just started. And he photo after breaking up with a girl, he photoshopped himself or he photoshopped her out and put a model in and put it up and put it up on his personal Facebook, and it started like getting mad reshares. And so he was like, and he started eventually like doing it with celebrities and all these people, like make it pretend he was actually there. And so then he does one with Usher, and he happens to meet Usher at a party because of all this stuff that he's been doing. And Usher's like, "Oh, what's up, man?" And he goes, "Oh, you were really drunk that night, but we had an awesome night. We did this, that." So yeah, so then he actually became famous from that, and I think that speaks so much to like the way the internet is now. Is like it's a place where you can be whatever. It's not really held down to like yeah.
Oh no, he played on it.
Uh huh.
And it's so funny because some people don't like that, but hey, that's just what it is. If you put in your brain, again, that energy into the universe.
Right.
Lululemon, the company, the clothing brand, has a slogan: "Fake it till you make it."
I need to keep playing on it.
And it's so funny
Yeah.
because some people don't like that, but hey, that's just what it is. If you put in your brain, again, that energy into the universe, this is where I see myself, I envision myself
Oh wow.
going.
Yeah, yeah.
I need to keep playing on it until I get there. You know what I mean? Like when I used to host boot camps, I always ensured that I looked like that trainer. I always had like Nike'd out, top to bottom, and I always looked the part. You know what I mean? Because that's where you want to go. That's where you're envisioning. So, is social media a little bit like fake it till you make it type of thing? Yeah. Like if a lot of these
Right.
profiles, if you look at it. And then people are like, oh, you can't believe what you see on Instagram. Yeah, that's true. A lot of these profiles, a lot of these pages, they put on, this vision,
So
this idea,
I think it's so.
and then
true.
people want to hate.
I kind of
want to
wind this thing down a little
But
bit.
hey, let
and,
them live because they may
I want to
get
kind of
there
talk about
eventually,
like
but
the
that's how you have to
specifics
do
of what
it.
you're doing
Just
with
believe that and see yourself already
Thoughts
there.
with Frankie. I
And
was
you're
gonna say
gonna-
talking
you're
with
gonna get there.
Frankie. Yeah, so I want to talk like what are some of the key issues you're going to be
Okay,
talking
yeah,
about,
sure.
writing about there, and where we can find you, which we've already plugged. But yeah,
Yes, Thoughts with Frankie at Thoughts with Frankie.
Things that are a little bit more intimate, a little bit more scary. People don't want to talk about. Right now, I've been talking about opportunities.
All right, so what I like right now to talk about are things that are a little bit more intimate, a little bit more scary
show.
that people don't want to talk about. Right now, I've been talking about, opportunities and things like that,
Cool.
and more along the self-help, like you're saying. But eventually, I would love to have people come on to the show, I quote unquote
Right.
show, right? And share their stories, their struggles, their journeys, right? So that way other people could say, hey, I'm going through something similar. There is light at the end of the tunnel. And I'm talking about things like anorexia. I'm talking about things like abuse. I'm talking about things like homelessness.
Right.
I'm talking about true things that happen in life. But these are people that overcome that and are able to now reflect and say, one, it's therapeutic for me to talk about it because these are hard things that a lot of people don't want to talk about. So one, it's helping the person that's coming onto the show, they could open up. And two, the people that are on the other side of the phone or the other side of Instagram and say, okay, wow, I feel that way too. Wow, this person overcame this struggle. There's hope for me also. I think mental health is extremely important. And I think, and I throw the term out there, emotions and feelings. All of these are true words. And I truly feel that they need to be spoken about. I think that we need to all, as a society, allow ourselves to
I
feel,
love it.
recognize that we have feelings and have emotions, and we're allowed to feel those things. It's just not a negative, and it's just about learning and cultivating, what they mean to us, so that we could have a proper reaction to it and move forward. I think it's so important. I had one of my partners committed suicide, and a couple years ago, and I would have never suspected it. And you don't naturally suspect it. I've known so many people that have committed suicide, and I'm just like, wow, like why? Why? Why did that person not feel like they could speak to somebody? And maybe they tried and they just couldn't find that connection with somebody. So I want to use this platform. I want to use Thoughts with Frankie as a means of expression, therapeutically for me, for the people listening, reading, whatever the case is, and also for the people that come on and share their stories as well. I think it's super important, and whatever comes of it, great. If there's no I don't see any monetary thing coming from it. It's truly not what it is at the moment. But I do love this podcast, this open discussion about stuff. I do feel like I have a lot of different avenues that I could offer somebody that we could talk about and express and share. So I think that's where I want to go with it. Just like a platform where people could say, hey, and what I like about the poetry sidebar is that even though I may put him or whatever, like if I'm giving it a gender, the message I try to keep it vague. My poetry, I sign off as AKA Frankie. That's a personality. That's a character. Is it my experiences? Sure. But I put AKA Frankie because my real name is Francis. But I'm giving you a character that's writing it because I want the person reading it to say, okay, Frankie, that's gender neutral. I don't know. All right. Can I, and a lot of men have also reached out and said, wow, I resonate with what you wrote, and I'm like, wow, that's great. And because I don't want it to just be like, a woman thing. Naturally, it's going to happen. Women are going to resonate with what I have to say, but I want men to feel that too. I always think back of my father. My father was born in 1950.
Right.
And I think that has
Put
to
your head
do
down and
with
get to work.
why when I was younger, when I wanted to express myself, it's not something that comes natural to him.
I agree.
It's more of like, it's life. Hey, kid, get over it. Move on. Let's go. We got things to do. Yeah, that's it. You know what I mean? So I also feel like that happens in the culture with men. You're not able to express these things. So that's the vision I have with at Thoughts with Frankie. So that's my writing, my poetry. And I have a subdivision or subsection, the Talks with Frankie. And those are the videos that I've been putting on IGTV. Eventually, I would love to put them. I'd love to put them on YouTube.
You should be on YouTube, by the way.
Yeah, thanks. I just feel I'm so hard on myself as far, I'm learning the whole quality, the video quality aspect of things. So I want it to be YouTube presentable,
Right,
you know.
right.
But like Gary says, right, when he's talking about wine, you just got to put it out there.
Just start.
Yeah, just start and just do it. So
Yep.
the next step would be putting it on YouTube because I want to be on different platforms. There's different generational gaps. There's people that are big on Facebook. There's people that are big on Instagram. There's
Right.
people that are big on YouTube. So I wanna be able to reach a spectrum because I find it fascinating. There's people, older people, that have reached out to me and they're like, you know, you're wise beyond your years. And I'm like, I've always said it. I have an old soul. I truly feel that. Because remember, my father was born in the 50s. So I love 60s, 70s music. Like, I
Wow.
love all those, like, oldies. You know what I mean?
Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young.
Oh my God. Like, I
Yeah.
love, like, sometimes I'll be like at work just jamming out. And then, like, the older folks are like, how you know that song? I'm like, man, I'm an old soul.
Old Motown stuff.
Yeah, but I truly appreciate people from different generations. You know, I got my niece, she's a teenager, she's 17, and she's like, you know, she's giving me shout outs on Instagram like, you see, this is why I tell my aunt everything, because she's a knower, she knows. And then I have people they're 65 years old saying, listen, I like what you have to say. I wish I had a friend like you when I was younger.
Universal truth is universal truth. Yeah, no,
Absolutely.
when it's a cosmic truth, it resonates with everybody.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just a matter of staying true to yourself. That's
Absolutely.
really
And
it.
that's the goal. Like, I want to live in my truth.
Right.
Do I love helping people? Absolutely.
Right.
I don't have an ulterior motive. I don't have an agenda. You know, I'm not making any money off of this. I have my career.
You're
I
not
have a
trying to sell
job.
T-shirts, no.
Yeah, and I mean, would I love to, you know, do I want to be like Atticus, the poet, and have like a hoodie or a bottle of wine that has like a line from my poems? Sure. I want to see people walk around with like a quote of mine on their shirts, but no, like that's not what this is about. This is truly about just a platform where people could just feel like it's a safe place.
Awesome.
You know?
Well, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank
Like,
you
this has
so
been
much
so
for having
real.
me.
So
Thank
real.
you so much. This is great. I love
Yeah.
this experience. I love what you're doing.
Thank you.
I respect it, and I think it's awesome. And hopefully we could just have more conversations about different things. Like I got a plethora of things to talk about.
Yeah. we'll bring you back on, after you grow, Talks with Frankie a little bit.
For sure.
And
Thank you for having me.
yeah, it'll be great. Thanks again.
Bye.